Welcome to the Death and All the Rest podcast, where we talk about life, death, and everything in between. So, Chris,
Yes.
something I was thinking about after our last episode had me thinking about the prevalence of existential dread in the population, in society, right? And I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about my own conceptions of what that probably is. And then I start doing a little bit of digging, some research, and I'm curious, like, how do you perceive the prevalence of this concept?
I think it's ever prevalent. I also think we do a very good job as a species of avoiding it, or at least not having it in the forethought of our thought or conscious day-to-day living. I mean, it is the background noise to our lives, and it's always there because it's what drives us forward. It's what we're afraid of. It's guaranteed to happen, and we live in a culture where we are constantly communicating death and violence to one another through media. So I think it's there all the time, and I think that we choose not to see it because I don't think we want to. It's useful. It helps us get through the day to day. And in fact, I saw a video once, I'll leave it with this, a long time ago, of a guy who was a special forces soldier for the United States. And after war, he'd done a lot of study on combat and stuff like that. And he's like, if you think about the fight, it's probably going to paralyze you. But if you go into it with an aggressive heart, with a full heart and not timid, he's like, you're probably going to do pretty well. And he boiled it down to that. So not being caught up in it is probably crucial for us to survive and fight our way through existence.
Yeah, because I see it, like, I agree with you. I think it's ever prevalent. I think for all of us on different levels, right? There's a different awareness to it. I think some people are good at, like you said, avoiding it completely, and they probably don't put much thought into it in any kind of big way at all. And then there are the people, us, who are consumed by it. And then there are the people in between, the people who have a healthy dose, so to say, as like it comes up and it helps navigate, but not getting too caught up in it. The people who, like we were talking about last episode, where it ebbs and flows, like depending on circumstances that are happening in their lives. But I think there's like drawbacks and benefits to both, to having it on the forefront and to not having it on the forefront, because and thinking about like Erik Erikson's stages of development over the lifetime, right? And that final stage being integrity versus despair. The people who haven't leaned into the existential experience at all and tried to identify meaning and the point of all of this and what they want to get out of it, when they look back, it's kind of like a missed opportunity, a complete missed opportunity. And then there's so much despair in that, versus also on the flip side of like the people who are so caught up in it, it can be debilitating at times, and it can guide so much exactly to what you were saying, right? Like that quote that you were just talking about, where like if you get so caught up in it, it reminds me of like the Dalai Lama quote, and I'm gonna butcher it, I'm just paraphrasing, but like where man gets so caught up in thinking about death that he never really lives.
Yeah,
I think there's like, it's interesting how it is something that like propels us forward, but can also be the thing that holds us back.
Yeah. And when you say that, I wonder if how much of this is the Western world. If in other cultures they do a much better job they have a much better like rituals and signposts for how to think and deal with death. I just think about it, the ancient Greeks, right? If you believe in an afterlife, that comes really freaking handy. Like the Vikings are awesome, man. If you are brave, if you confront death and don't let it slow you down and fight. You get to go and hang out with Odin in Valhalla, where you drink and you party, and there's hot guys and hot girls, and you just party for eternity. That doesn't suck, you know. And if
That doesn't suck.
no, so
Yeah.
if you're brave, you get to like live like this feast afterwards. It's like it's a test,
Mm-hmm.
you know. That gives a really really useful context, you know.
Yeah.
Christian society, heaven and hell, in purgatory, depending on if you believe in it, that can be a little bit uh, more difficult. Maybe the Catholics could speak to that a little bit more, because then you kind of feel like you're either screwed or guaranteed that you can't be screwed, that you're no matter what you do. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of cultural markers that help us navigate this
Yeah.
anymore. This all comes back to how we just seem so jaded now as a species.
It's funny that you brought it up because I was thinking the same thing even as I asked like the prevalence because I'm speaking for Western culture as the prevalence, like we're basing it on my exposure and then the Google search, which is gonna pop up, relevant this society. Because even thinking about from the lens of reincarnation, right? Like, there's differences between all kinds of belief systems, and there's different belief systems in Western society in and of itself. But then when you really like zoom out and you're looking at all of it, yeah, because like reincarnation, if there's this opportunity to do it over for better or worse, that's a completely different mindset than the default of I just get to go party with Odin in Valhalla, and different than like and then I never exist again. So there's like these levels, and I'm sure that that has a huge impact on like who's getting too caught up in the existential dread of it all if they're not worried about what what happens after. Like
Yeah,
maybe that is like a mitigating factor a bit.
maybe. I think I'm more worried about pain, like going out in pain or going out with amnesia, which is probably one of my biggest fears, like the loss of self, degradation of my
Mm-hmm.
mental faculties. Because I experienced that with my grandparents, and that looks like a living hell. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a nightmare, and I don't want that. But of oblivion, yes, or like the thought of if we are just made of star stuff, if there was in fact a singularity in the Big Bang and exploded it all out, and we're all made of the universe's matter, and when you die, you just lose consciousness, but you're not gone. You've just you never were here truly in the sense that you're just part of the universe and you just continue to be part of the universe and just in a different form. I'm cool with that. I think that's
I'm
cool.
cool with that too. That reminds me of this is like a pop culture connection, but it reminds me of are you familiar with Mike Flanagan?
I am a little bit.
Like you were.
I haven't seen any of his stuff, but people speak very highly.
You should, especially for like just the way that you think the existential stuff, the philosophical. It's really there's some really great themes to pick out of things, but in this one the one series that he put out, Midnight Mass, there's this whole dialogue. There's a point actually. There's two different dialogues about it, but where two of the characters are having a conversation at one point about like what do you think happens after you die, right?
Mm.
And they have these different ideas of what that looks like, but then later um hopefully this isn't a spoiler to anybody who hasn't watched it or anything, but
No.
I won't say names, but like the one of the characters that was involved in that initial dialogue is actually like dying, and as it's happening she's narrating the experience and she's like this was all a dream and I'm waking up and I'm going back to where I came from, and the dialogue is several minutes long and it's actually really incredible. And it had me thinking, I was like exactly what you said, because this is all we know right now, but like in the greater scheme of it all it may not be, and this might be, it really might, like what it does feel like a dream and it's over and it's this little blip on the radar of whatever else our matter has gotten to do and will get to do for all of eternity. And that that is a soothing thought. It's very trippy to think about in that way because like all we do know is what we're living right now, and
Mm-hmm.
this feels so much like everything. Like
Yeah.
this is the full scale of it. Um, so trippy to think outside of that, but also I don't hate that. I
Hmm.
don't hate that ideology.
I think, um, for me at least, in my life, not knowing and kind of embracing the fact that you can't know, that
Mm-hmm.
opened up possibility and like mystery, because I like mystery. I think that makes that there's room for possibility and hope and something better than what's going on in our day-to-day lives, and that helps a lot. I think that's really powerful, and same thing with like physics. Now they study physics, and our conceptualization of what the universe is, it kind of trickles down from the high level science and math, literally math, and then the physicists, and then the rest of us. And so our idea of what reality is changes, from the possibility of multiverse,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, Einstein, whoever first thought of it. And now you have Spider-Man through the multiverse. It's in everything, everywhere, all at once. So does that mean that there's all these different versions of me? So if one dies, other ones are going on, or does it actually mean that somehow physics supports the possibility that my consciousness continues and we're just not cognitive of it? We just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay, that's cool. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like. I think I have part of my issue, or not issue, but part of who I am is that there was a rejection of a model of the Judeo-Christian Islamic heaven and hell from my childhood. At one point, where as I grew up and I was like, became more rational as I matured, I was like, this is bullshit. This doesn't make sense. I don't believe in this. And that I went from that to atheism, and then to being, agnostic, and now to I don't really label it. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Possibility. I like possibility. Sum it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that has, like, we kind of were touching on this in the midst of this conversation, but like thinking about how can the awareness of death influence our daily living and our decisions around daily living
Mm-hmm.
in good and bad ways, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it can make you, I think for me, like it can make you really consider what's meaningful and valuable and how you want to be spending your time. Because if you're looking at it, no matter what you believe comes after, but if you're looking at it as like, this is what I've got now, whatever this limited time is, and that's different for all of us too. But like, if you're trying to be a good person, if the goal is to be successful, if the goal is to help people, whatever the goal is to have tons of meaningful connections with people that you care about. But like, there's so much influence that that can have. But I'm curious, like, that's my mindset around it. But
Yeah.
what's your mindset around that?
I think like you. I think I take it. I want to be a little bit serious about life. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like the living an absurdist life, like nothing matters, there's no meaning. Um, as far as I know, what I can see proven around me, you only have one life, so you should make something out of it for yourself. I want to have meaning. I want to have direction. I want to have a course. I'm not so interested in like social success. I tried that, didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do value sharing the experience with others. I do value like speculating on it. I do want to leave my mark in the sense that I want to be a decent human being, and I want to be part of the solution, not part of the goddamn problem. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that like I do think about this stuff. And I don't want to be distracted and watching television and on the internet, although that does get me, or drunk, like I was. I want to be here in the now, and I also don't want to be played and controlled either by the system or actually by the elite. And I think thinking about this actually helps me push back against that. Actually, I use that as kind of motivation. If I think they're playing with me, I'm going to fight back a little bit. Like, fuck you. And I think this is related to that because I think this gives me a little bit of an edge, if that
Mm.
answers your question.
Yeah. You mentioned social success and
Mm-hmm.
you said, I tried that. Nah, right?
Yeah.
Like, but what is like social success? What does that mean?
Money and power.
Oh, okay.
It means
Okay.
external markers of it means other people looking at me and thinking I'm hot shit. That's what it means. It means
Mm.
external people, other people admiring me or respecting me or fearing me. And it means money and power. It means control over other human beings. And
Yeah.
that I don't think is very, I don't think it satisfies the emptiness inside. What satisfies the emptiness inside is knowing that we're in all this chaos and there is no meaning. But I've chosen for myself what I think is important and what I think is good. And I try to do it. Probably fuck it up most of the time, but it's the trying that matters. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's this like societal script,
Yes.
right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, you do this, you do things this way, whatever it is, you go to elementary and secondary education, and then you go to college or you get a job, and then from there there's like these different things. You end up in a relationship and you get married, you have kids, you do all these things, the social conformity piece.
Mm-hmm.
And like you and I have seen this so much, and for listeners listening to this that may not know the extent of the work that Chris and I do, but we do coaching for people and we work together
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of the realms with the people that we're working with. We tag team a lot of what we're doing, and something that is so constantly prominent is this what I refer to as like an existential crisis, and there you can almost time them based on, and it falls so in line with this social script
Mm-hmm.
that we're supposed to follow, where people, they get to the point of having achieved that, and now it's like, now what? Like, okay, I'm, mid 20s. That's a lot of times, right? Mid to late 20s, where people have either graduated college and gotten into their field, or they went a trade route or did something and they're getting established in a career. And then now they're like moving out, they're living on their own, they're doing all the things, they've done the adulting, and there's no clear line of like what's next. And then they feel like they're floundering because it's like, well, fuck, like someone told me what to do this whole way, and now what? And now that's when you really start thinking about, I think that for a lot of people that can be the first big point of existential crisis that kicks up, because now you're thinking about the next steps are like what you want out of it when you've been just going with the flow of what we all are just expected to be doing.
Yeah. That's individuating.
Yeah.
That's they haven't fully decided for themselves what their values are and what matters for them. They've been checking the boxes. And that's scary because like you could do that your whole life. And you're like 50,
Yeah.
60, 70, you're like, what? Oh shit. And like then you get pissed, or potentially because all that time's passed. I blew off a lot of time. A lot.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I still fight that, but I don't want to do that. And I wonder what other people's experiences on this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also, if you continue to get these external marks of success and validation, like really powerfully, like you're making a shit ton of money, you've got a lot of power over other human beings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that external validation, you might just keep on going, you know.
Sure.
And potentially at the same time have a gaping hole in your life and not know who you are and be insecure And so you keep going and you keep getting all this validation, and maybe you even fully believe in it, but you still feel um, that loss or that fear. That I think that's probably much more common trap for these guys and girls in extreme power than we realize. I think because we see it.
God, my mind's going in so many directions when you start bringing this up. Like what you're saying, right? You're checking the boxes, but you're checking somebody else's boxes because you never really stop to think. We just go on autopilot, and we never really stop to think until we get to that point where it's like, what's next, and we have to create that for ourselves. And like you said, some people go through their whole lives, and that really well known um, midlife crisis
Mm-hmm.
that people talk about. It's like people get to that point where it got they followed it for so long, checking those boxes that it's like they didn't stop to think about it until then, and then it's like, oh no, and then people feel like it's too late to change trajectory or to create their path or whatever. And then because so that's one part of what I'm thinking, and I'm gonna throw these at you and you respond to whatever you think is
Okay.
like interesting and relevant.
All right.
But like the other part of me goes to, because you're talking about this, the social validation piece,
Mm-hmm.
that these people who admire you, maybe you have power over these people that are saying like, damn, Chris has it all together, look at him, look at what he's doing. And it makes me think too of the element, the layer that social media
Mm-hmm.
has added to that, because that feels like comparison, right? We're looking at what someone else is doing, what someone else has. And social media has allowed us to do that on this scale that is so great, because one of the things I say all the time is like, on social media, most people aren't posting every single aspect of life, right? You're seeing their highlight reels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we know our own experience, the entire behind the scenes, and we're comparing that. And it's like, it makes us feel so othered, but it's not an accurate comparison
Mm-mm.
to be analyzing. And I think that's really hard.
Yeah. I think it happens like you're not fully conscious of it, but you're like you said, you're watching somebody's highlight reel and comparing yourself to it, and this is like
Mhm.
people are good at this stuff now, they're so good
Yeah.
at like they're like all their little Hollywood studios running around on two legs. They're like they have the
Mm-hmm.
entire skill set, and with the simple tech, Photoshop and whatever, they can really make themselves look the best. And it's like when you see people at the gym who are recording themselves at the gym, and that has become internalized now. And what I worry about is
Mm.
there's like a feedback loop to this. Like if you're like you get caught up in this, and you're not maybe you're afraid you're not recording enough, you're not producing enough content of your own life so that you can pick the highlight reel, so that you can show it on the screen, so that you can get the validation. And so you're just chasing this the entire time, and you're chasing it against all these other people who are chasing it, and everybody's just running, and it's freaky. Like I see these younger guys go to the gym and they're all recording themselves bench pressing and stuff, and I would never occur to me at all. I come up, started working out way before that, so I don't have that in me, but I don't get it. But I guess I do get it to some level. I don't know.
Yeah.
I worry about that because life just becomes a simulation. We're just all performing all the time. That ain't good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, when you said like people are really good at it, they're really good at creating the highlight reels. I mean, there's a whole profession based around it. That's what influencers are literally paid to do, and they can make good money doing it, and good for them. Like,
Yeah.
do the things society offers this, do the thing. But it is, it's so easy to get caught up in, the more we normalize the life that we are picking and choosing and putting out to social media, and then the validation that we're getting from that like, I think that there is an impact on when we're not having good times and we're having struggles. We're in this really interesting time where more than ever we're connected to other people because of the internet and social media and the ability to see other people, but we're not seeing the raw footage So we're feeling even more disconnected
Yeah.
despite being more connected, because we know our experience. If we're struggling, having a really tough time, life is shit at the moment or something, we all go through that. But everybody else seems like they're doing good all the time. Everything's great, they're living their best life, and look at them. And I think that's creating this feeling of isolation, which is funny because internally we're feeling isolated, and then in practice there's so much connection that you can see everybody on social media and what they're doing, but they're not actually like lending to each other much at all.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? The medium is the message. Um, I think we know it's a con. I think we feel it's a
Mm-hmm.
con. We're just a bunch of con artists running around all the time. And I see this. So, like if the platform dictates the relationship, and you take just like Twitter or Blue Sky for example, and it only allows like 40 characters, right? So it's a bite-sized 40 characters, and it's all in competition with all the other posts that are on there. So you got to make that potent. You got to make that moment hit to go viral to get everybody reading it, right? And then you
Yeah.
police it. You police, like, you make something viral, and then the people are trying to spin off that and like try to one up you, and then you're trying to like, no, get the fuck out of here with my, you libtard, with this comment and all that stuff. So I think that relationship affects you. It doesn't just affect the communication, it sculpts the interaction. And if it sculpts the interaction and that's how you interact with people, it's going to sculpt who you are. I see some
Mm-hmm.
extremely intelligent, very sophisticated thinkers, writers on Blue Sky and Twitter and all this stuff, and people who I think know better. I think they definitely know better, but I think they get caught up in this game too. So we're all kind of gatekeeping all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And where does it all end? In this space that is, it's just all this bad information. It's all this bad juju. We're all caught up in noise, and I think it distracts from living an intentional life. It distracts from the fact that we all are racing to, the end of our lives. We could be doing something a little bit better with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I get caught up in it all the time,
Yeah.
you know, because there is some valuable stuff out there too, you know,
Yeah.
and people do some really powerful, like, action, you know, they do a lot of really good support of other people, um,
Mm.
and causes online. And so, how do you police your experience on there? I know some people are good at it. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I don't think it's all bad juju that's out there. And I think we it would seem counterintuitive for us to say that's all it is, because what we're doing here, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is social media and we know there's like a utility in it. But I think the big thing for us to be thinking about, because we're being preyed upon,
Yeah.
the industries are preying upon us, the tech industry, like, this is the whole thing. And that's fine. We can use that to our benefit. So, like, I think the balance is like figuring out where the utility is versus where we fall in prey to something that was set up to sabotage us. And, like, they do the things, the clicks, the likes, all of that is validation. And it hits dopamine. We get
Hmm.
dopamine release when that happens. So that's a way that they have found a way to harness a naturally occurring chemical, a feel good chemical in our brain, to make us default to this. Like, this is human nature. We want to feel good. We want to
Hmm.
feel connected. We want to have those hits. And I think that's really the point of, like, where does it serve you versus where are you serving it, and figuring out that line for yourself. And I don't think a lot of us stop and think about it because it's so normalized. But that's really where it comes for me, because I'm like, I see the value in social media. I see, like,
Mhm.
And there is really good connection that can come out of that. There are people, I live 3,000 miles away from most of the people I know and grew up with, and getting to just know what's going on in their lives because life is busy, that's huge. That's great. I love that.
Mhm.
um but again, like, how do you make sure that it's serving you, it's doing something, it's giving you some kind of benefit, versus you're getting bogged down and missing out on living and being present, and that very like here and now kind of mindset, because we're caught up in just looking at these other things and watching other people's lives.
You have to have grounding practices. You have to have self-care practices. That's how I think about it. Um,
Sure, yeah.
Whatever, touch grass, or
Yes.
touch snow. You do. You have to
I
like,
say touch moss all the time.
yeah, touch moss. I'm down with that.
Touch moss.
Touch,
Yeah.
pet your dog. Like
Pet your dog.
that's real. You know?
But you say these things, Chris, that like we take for granted, right?
Yeah.
Self-care, grounding. Like, I know what that means. You know what that means.
Yes.
We know we're so heavily caught up in how to do those things and practicing that in so much life. And I know you have really interesting parameters around like your social media use and things like that. But like, for anybody who's listening to this and is hearing self-care, because I know so often when I'm introducing self-care as a concept to clients that I'm working with, there's always this idea that that means like taking a bath
Yeah.
and resting.
Yeah.
And like, sure, yeah, totally it is.
Sure.
But like, it's extends so far beyond that. So like, tell the people what they need to know. What is self-care? What's grounding?
It's not. I mean, I take a bath or like go to a sauna. That is good. Like that's hygiene. That's comfort. But
Yeah.
there's much more to it. Self care is first of all behavioral acts that you regularly um, act in or do that benefit your health and benefit your mental state, and it's all interrelated. The basics
Mm-hmm.
are eating well, sleeping, exercising, and hygiene. Those are the four basic that pillars of self-care as I see it, because if you practice those, you get better results out of life. If you eat well, you're healthier. If you exercise regular, you're healthier, you're stronger, you slow down the aging process. If you sleep is so absolutely critical, and we talk about this a lot now because we're so bad at it. Sleep is where your body repairs itself. Sleep is where it flushes out the waste products that are produced in your brain, which does occur. Sleep is where we release stress. Sleep is where we rebalance our hormones. You absolutely need to do it. You have to like look at it as something that you focus some of your attention and energy on, because it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to push through and to not engage in these behaviors. And we are so overworked and we are pushing so hard, and we're so distracted as a species
Mm-hmm.
that we forgot to do this stuff. It used to be your natural day to day life. It would just do it, and certain countries are in certain and cultures are better at it in certain ways than others.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a city that requires you to walk a lot, you're going to be in much better shape. Where if you live in a city that sits you on your ass and makes you very sedentary, the fact that you're walking a lot regularly is going to help you a lot in your self care, because that's exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what I'm talking about, and there's more to it than that. We can get into talking about meditation or mindfulness, and those are critical points as well. I think they're worth an entire podcast on their own.
Yeah.
But the basics of self-care are diet, exercise, sleep, and hygiene, and it behooves all of us to practice these, not to think of them as absolutes. Either you're doing it or you're failing it, but I think of it as something you always need to be cycling into and
Yeah.
working on. And if those are critically compromised, notice it. definitely be aware of that, and think about how that compromise may be affecting your internal experience of life, your mental state,
Yes.
your mood, how you relate to the people that you're intimate with and your friends. Think about
Mhm.
that, and maybe like instead of saying, I'm so freaking angry at my kids or my partner or whatever, say, am I exhausted and it's coming out as irritation, and I
Mhm.
need to do something about that. I think that's solid.
Yeah. Yeah, because we get so caught up, we get swept away. Life is busy, and we've got markers to meet and things to do, and we forget that like at the end of the day, this meat sack can only last so long if we're not taking care of it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
regardless, at the very basics, like this is a capsule that has to be taken care of, and grinding it into the ground does not produce longevity. I talk a lot about spoon theory. It's one of my favorite things to relate to because it's this idea, it's so simple, but it's this idea that we all have so many spoons on any given day, right? That's a metaphor for us to be able to visualize this idea of spoons hold volume, and the spoons hold the volume of everything that we've got going on, all of our what we call vulnerability factors, right? And that can be relating to the basic needs that you just talked about. If we're tired or we're hungry, we're not hydrated well, like all of these things. And then also other things, interpersonal connections, if there's conflict or there's tension going on in our relationships, if there's stress at work, all kinds of different things. And then they fill up our spoons in different capacities. Different things take up different amounts of volume. But like say on any given day, we have 10 spoons. Typically, that's like our baseline of spoons. But we've got all this stuff going on. We haven't been sleeping lately. Our diet's been crap. We've been eating tons and tons of junk food, not getting a lot of nutrition. We're not moving our bodies because we're just so exhausted. We're too exhausted to be moving. Then on top of that, now we're irritable. Now we're in conflict with the
Mm-hmm.
people that we're in relationship with. Our performance at work might be suffering. It's compounding.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we just wake up and our spoons are full. Which means what? We have no capacity to put anything else in them for the rest of the day. What happens when we don't have capacity? Problems. Huge problems happen. So like with spoon theory, the reason I bring this up to people is not just to like have them observing all of the vulnerability factors playing in for them at any given moment. That is a level of insight and awareness that's really important. But for what? To know what to do with it, right? And I tell people all the time with our spoons, we either have to figure out how to take out volume that's taken up in the spoons and get rid of it. That can be checking it off the list, delegating it to somebody else, deciding that this doesn't actually even need to happen, or creating more spoons to spread that volume throughout more. And that is where self care comes in, and finding the ways to do that. And self care, like you said, I mean, it's this concept that we could probably talk about over the span of several episodes, because there's the basic self-care needs that you're talking about, and then there's like really getting into the self-care, the different elements of social self-care,
Mm-hmm.
professional self-care, environmental self-care, emotional self-care. What are we doing to engage in those things, and that's really important. I think I was telling you recently, like I had a friend who came out to visit from the East Coast, and he was here for just about a week. And it was great to see him. I had a great time. We were having so much fun. And typically I have a lot of time for myself because I live in a household where it's just me and my husband. And my husband's an early riser for work, so he is early to fall asleep. And then once he's asleep, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, I'm up until 1 in the morning because I'm a night owl. So I have a lot of restoration time there, and I wasn't getting that because I was sharing that restoration time with my friend, which we were just doing the same stuff, chilling, watching TV, whatever. And it was like a couple of days in, I was going to bed and I said to my husband, I'm so exhausted. I'm drained. I feel so drained right now. And when my friend left, I wear a Fitbit, and I look at that data because I think it's really useful to have objective data about what is happening with our bodies. And for a week, an entire week after he left, I was sleeping 10 to 11 hours a night. I was zonked.
Mm-hmm.
My readiness score Fitbit gives you is, a range of 0 to 100, 100 being your ultimate, like you can take on the world today. 0 being like, girl, you need to lay down and just relax today. But my readiness score for an entire week didn't go above 20 and was often around 15. Really low,
Yeah,
really low. We're thinking about a grade on an exam, 100,
sure.
and I'm getting a 15 for a week. And I was like, I was so baffled by it because I didn't even think that the social energy that I was expending would actually lead to that level of exhaustion. And that here was, quantifiable data saying, yeah, no, this happened. And it's funny because I had to spend a week resting for myself. And like, that involves the different levels of self care. That was a lot of sleep for sure for me. But that was also, I have to get outside. Being outside in nature is huge for me. That's a grounding thing. And that energizes me. But I'm an introvert. And that social exposure, as fun as it was, and it has much of a great time that I had with my friend, I was drained and I didn't have time to like refill my social battery at any point, and then I crashed for an entire week.
Yeah. I don't know what the proportion is, but your brain uses a massive amount of calories. So when you're doing a lot of like heavy mental lifting, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
being present with somebody and interacting, good or bad, or if you're doing like a lot of intellectual labor in your job, you're like
Mm-hmm.
burning a lot of energy, because you think that
Yeah.
it's the guys out there doing construction or professional athletes who are burning all the calories, and they are, they are a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the intellectual part has a lot to do with that too. So if you're like dealing with really, really positive, heavy, um, good social interaction, like getting married, you're probably going to be pretty damn tired afterwards. And if you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
really dark, heavy, painful, highly emotionally charged circumstances or people, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to tire you the hell out. And
Yeah.
and it would behoove you to find space to recharge and rest. And in fact, um, we need more carve outs in our lives for that. And I think about that a lot. And this is something else I wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
Our capacity to normalize to difficult and stressful circumstances is extremely impressive as a species. And it doesn't mean that it isn't costing you at the same time. The mental model I always use is I say people have this capacity to lean into things, where you turn the negative into something that you get off on in a way that allows you to continue to do it. And maybe that's addictive behavior.
Yeah.
But like when I was in the corporate world, like I was just so gung ho about it and aggressive about it. And that allowed me to continue to do it even while it was killing me. And I was actively
Mm-hmm.
killing myself with the drugs and alcohol. Um, but I could just keep going because it's all I saw, and I was so focused on it. But I was burning the candle, on both ends and along the middle, like they say, and I
Mm-hmm.
was not doing self care at all. I was not practicing it at all, and I burned through my entire 30s that way.
Yeah.
And this is how we lose our lives. And I didn't even thinking about existential dread is like part of it is never dealing with it, like we were talking about earlier, and we're
Yeah.
getting caught up in other shit. And I saw there's a famous HBO documentary, I forget the name of it, where they go around the country, US, and they interview a lot of people who are at end of life care, and
Mm.
they ask them, what do you think about life and what are your regrets? And all their regrets are the same. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that they had rich and poor people from different ethnicities and backgrounds, and they say, I wish I hadn't worked so much. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's number one. I think number two is I wish I'd stayed connected to my friends.
Yeah.
Um, and I think number three was I wish I'd pursued my passion or done
Mm-hmm.
something, explored more what I wanted to do with my life. We all could have guessed that, and
Sure.
and we know it. But like, you can spend your entire life doing stuff you don't want to do. But on the other hand, let me flip that around real quick. Though is like, uh, we all have to do a lot of stuff we don't want to do in this life
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make it.
Even when we're living in alignment with what we want and our own personal path, when we've thought about that, that still happens, right? That stuff doesn't just go away.
No, no. There is an element, and I think about this a lot. There's Our lives
Mm-hmm.
are compromised to a certain extent. Like nothing's pure, because you got to make that money. So
Yeah.
in a sense, you have to play the game. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I don't 100% believe in that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you get to decide um, how you play the game, and
Yeah.
there are some choices that you can make, and ignoring it will not help you. Uh, to put out off placing responsibility onto the system and not on yourself will not help you. I think about this a lot. I think personal responsibility is the way out. Taking
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for your own life, um, and for your own care and the care of your intimates, um, and being active in that is at least the base for building a life, I think.
Yeah. And I think like what you're saying, I hear it. And also I can't help but to think about the people that like so many of these things are not in their control
Yeah.
because they're living in survival mode,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a very real reality for a lot of people where, lower socioeconomic status and like not having certain privileges afforded to them that like these people have to keep they're grinding to be in survival. They're living that like barely even paycheck to paycheck, right? Like and that's a harder place to be. And I like
Yeah.
for those people it's that hierarchy of needs, right? Because there's like the basic needs, shelter, food, that kind of stuff, and then there's this self-actualization all the way at the top, but there's all these levels before you get up to that. There's interpersonal relationships and all this stuff. And for people who can't move out of that bottom level of the pyramid, it's hard to think at this in this higher level and in this way where you're being philosophical and you're reflecting on what you want out of life when you're literally just trying to survive. And that's part of this system that's so frustrating, is that like this is this is by design a way that society keeps people down,
Mm.
because if people don't have time to think about it, people don't have the ability to do something against it.
Yeah. Yep. They want you to keep you busy and working, and to not think about this stuff, not question, the system, and have just enough money to buy their shit and have no power to do um, anything about it. Because if you live paycheck to paycheck, how do you store up enough resources to fight back? You take the
Yeah.
time to protest, and you're out of a job.
You're missing a day of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You travel somewhere that's not immediate to get to somewhere that's protesting, even if it's just a few hours away. That's gas money. So maybe you had to miss work. Yeah, you're paying for gas money. Like it's hard. It's harder than it sounds. And that's not to say there's totally a locus of control element here. There are things in our control. But for people, when we're living in survival mode, we're not thinking. We
mm,
can't possibly, because we have to be worried about just staying alive and that basic need being first and foremost. And that's, like I said, that's by design. And even what you were saying with like the working, and you can get so caught up in that, we get reinforced at all angles by that, right?
mm,
Oh, the hard worker, grinding, rise and grind, do this thing, working so hard. This person works 80 hours a week. Wow, that's incredible. It's glamorized in a
yes.
really
Yeah.
warped way, because like we're not supposed to be thinking about the quality of our lives
Mm,
and what we want to get out of it. And that is so deeply ingrained in all of us. And to even think outside of that and start trying to move outside of that in incapacity, one, I recognize as a huge privilege to be able to even have the ability and the circumstances to allow for that.
Yeah.
But two, like that's it's a risk. And that causes a ton of its own existential dread, because now you're thinking about all this stuff and like how it's designed to work against you and trying to make your life your own. And there are ways to do that, right? And we know that. But like it's really easy to get bogged down by that, and it feels so heavy.
Yeah. And it's so easy to spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff and
Yeah.
living in the privilege of being able to be confronted with these ideas, um, and not realize that most people or a lot of people are dealing with much more existential threats that they
Right.
don't necessarily need to think about the concept. They're dealing with the reality.
Yeah.
And
They don't have the time to think about the concept. It's like you nailed it. It's existential threat versus existential dread,
yeah,
right?
maybe we should rename the podcast that. Uh, but yeah, that's it. And now we're fucking doing this thing where we'll throw you in jail. You're poor. You're too
Yeah.
poor. They're doing that. They're trying to
Yeah.
criminalize homelessness because they want to put people in prisons, because that is a huge way to make money. And then you got all that slave labor. 30% of the firefighters fighting that fire in LA are convicts. Now they got to choose it while being in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and they get paid like very, very. I think it's like 16 cents an hour or something like that, and they get paid
Mm-hmm.
some. They get a couple of slices of ham and a piece of bread, but and they get all the injuries. But yeah,
Yep.
they're gonna scoop people up and put them in there. They really have got us. The system really has us locked in very well,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yep.
teaches you that the only way out is to obey the system and escape to the elite level, and then get all that validation, so that you're willing to perpetuate it. You know,
Exactly. Yes. It's so cyclical.
it's so
And that's a
reinforcing.
big part when your four pillars of self-care. I always speak to five pillars of self-care, and
Ooh.
shelter
Ah,
is the
yeah,
fifth.
that's kind of
And
handy. Yeah.
right, like because really, I mean, like not even just like yes in the aspect of having shelter, but do you have safe shelter? Do you have shelter that has heating? Do you have shelter that is safe in terms of like the people that you're living with?
Yeah.
Right? Are you in a situation where your domestic dwelling is abusive?
Yeah.
Right? Like these are all compromises to our ability to take care of ourselves.
Yes. Environment. Environment is
Mm-hmm.
key. That's why they put people into
Yeah.
solitary confinement. They
Yeah.
rob you of stimulus,
Yep.
or when we live in environments that are poisonous and toxic to us, you know,
Yeah.
uh, that's tough. Just have enough peace in your own head, you know. That's why they play horrible music to prisoners as a form of torture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. uh,
Well, and all of this stuff in and of itself is, it's crushing when we talk about
yeah.
it and think about it. And this is the reality. And I feel like this is a good way for us to wrap up this session with a strategy that we can model for people. What are you going to do to like come out of this conversation and move forward in the rest of your life that you have going on today? What do you do to get back to it?
I take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
I drink some water. I think that being able to do very simple acts of self care, very basic stuff, is key. Is how you
Mm-hmm.
do it. When I was hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail and miserable, the one thing that would make me feel good, was a warm meal. So if you have that capacity, you just take a warm meal and enjoy it and be present for it and not spun up. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing they say is a poor man's health insurance is exercise. You can work your body. The guys in prison work out all the time because it keeps them from going nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So the very basic level of self-care, moving your body, trying to eat well, trying to rest. We can only do so much, right? But being cognizant of it and doing the little things, like a walk is great if you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, do a bunch of jumping jacks or push-ups. Do something that allows you to move your body in a healthy fashion. That I would do, and I would also do the basics of meditation, which is just focused breathing. You just breathe in, breathe out, think about your breathing. Don't worry about the thoughts that go through your head. Whatever happens is fine. That's the key. Is you you think about your breathing, which is usually something that is subconscious, that just is automatic. By thinking about your breathing, you put that monkey mind to work. So whatever else is going on in your head, you get a little bit of physical and mental stabilization by the breathing. I would do that. I mean, they can't take that away from you. They can. They can take everything away from us. But if you have that capacity, you can do it.
Hmm. Yep.
It's not enough. It's a struggle.
It's yeah, and it's that's where we have to, like, it's this balance between not being toxic with our positivity and what we can do, but
Yeah.
also not losing sight of the fact that we not feeling letting us ourselves feel like we have no control
Yeah.
over what we can do to take care of ourselves. There's a balancing act to that, and I know for me, like, what I'm going to do, I'm going to compartmentalize. Work is over. Once I'm done here and my laptop will close and I'm going to go outside, there's 2 hours of sun left and I'm going to go walk in the woods. Both as like moving my body and it's grounding to be back in just like nature and being out there and focusing on that. And that's what's in my control in this situation. I can't control all of these variables and this societal anger and rage that this all makes me feel, but like there's stuff that I can do for myself to help me come back down from it and regulate and feel peace is a big part of that.
Yeah. The small joys in the here and now.
Yep.
And compartmentalization. We say don't do that. No, do that.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah,
I mean, right?
pros and
There's
cons. Sure.
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in another episode, I'm sure. But defense mechanisms, compartmentalization being one. But like, there's times and places for that, and there are adaptive ways to use that, and there are maladaptive ways to use that. When you compartmentalize to separate work and life, or different relationships, or whatever it is, that is useful. Do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry for our abrupt ending, everyone. In these first few episodes, we were still honing in our outro, thanks to feedback from our previewing audience. So in the future, hopefully you won't feel like these end like The Sopranos did. But for now, we just want to say thank you for joining us on Death and All the Rest and exploring all things existential with us. We look forward to future episodes that you can join us for.